Okay, today's video lesson is discussing pH. What is pH and why in the world is it important that we discuss pH? So pay close attention as you write these notes on the page I told you to write them in class today, and write down everything that you see on the screen as well as anything extra that I may write down. Okay, you are responsible for having these notes and for learning the information in the videos because I'm not going to be discussing this in class. So make sure you are taking your time and pausing the video when you need to, or rewatching parts that you might need to go back and rewatch. Okay, make sure you're not just skipping through anything to try and get to the end in a hurry, right? It's important that you learn this information. So when you are ready to begin, go ahead and proceed. The first question that my students always have for me is, what does pH even stand for? Okay, we use these two letters when we talk about pH, and we learn about what pH means, but we always want to know what is pH an abbreviation for? It is actually an abbreviation for the power of hydrogen. Okay, notice that the P here is lowercase. That's because it's not a pronoun. Hydrogen, however, is an important element on our periodic table of the elements, and so since it's the name of an element, it's going to be capitalized. That letter is going to be capitalized. So that is why when you see pH written, the P is lowercase and the H is capitalized. We're going to see that hydrogen plays an important part in determining the pH of a substance here in a little bit. So if you have everything written down, go ahead and continue. If not, then take a moment and press pause to make sure you have everything recorded. One of the main things we have to make sure we understand about pH is the pH scale. Okay, this is a scale that ranges from 1 to 14, and in the middle is a 7, which means this substance is completely neutral. Right, so right now I want you to pause the video for a second and look at the pH scale that I have placed here and find what substance has a pH of 7. Right, hopefully you saw that right here we have water with a pH of 7. Okay, so water is completely neutral. It's a neutral substance on our pH scale, which is going to be very important for living creatures like ourselves. Right, so let's look down here at the lower end. So everything below 7 is considered to be an acid. Okay, everything below 7 is considered to be an acid. And the lower the number is going to be the stronger the acid. Right? Everything above 7 is considered to be a base. All right, so let's take a moment here, and on your piece of paper, let me clear all these strokes off. Let's go ahead and draw a pH scale. So let's have 0 down here, and we'll have 14 over here. And we have 7 in the middle, like this, rough pH scale. Okay, so remember 7 is considered to be neutral. Anything less than 7 is considered to be acidic. Anything stronger than 7, larger than 7, is considered to be basic. Okay, down here at a pH of 0, this is going to be our strongest acid. And at a pH of 14, this is the strongest base. Okay, so things like acids could be like lemon juice. Down here, almost at a pH of 1, we have hydrochloric acid, which can burn you and damage the proteins in your eyes and things like that. Super dangerous. And then as we go up the scale, they become less and less acidic and more neutral, right? On our basic side, we're going to have things over here like not so basic would be like baking soda. Okay, you probably all have baking soda in your cabinet at home. Sometimes we put it in our fridge to keep it all nice and fresh smelling. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, and it is a weak base, what we would consider to be a weak base. right? And then down here at the very end, like 14, our strong base, this is going to be like a drain cleaner, like Drano. Okay, so Drano is a very, very strong base, and we definitely don't want to get that on our skin or, again, in our eyes or anything like that. Some other weak bases are going to be like soap and things like that. You'll see, bases tend to have a slippery, slimy feeling to them, whereas acids don't. Okay? All right, so make sure you have all of this written down before proceeding to the next slide. All right, like we discussed on the previous slide, an acid is a substance with a pH of less than 7. Okay, so anything less than 7 is considered to be an acid. And remember, the lower the pH, the stronger the acid. Okay, so down here I have some pictures for you. Just remember that citrusy things are strong, are acids. We have some chemicals that are probably acidic here in this picture. I want to point out the center picture here. This picture says low pH means we have lots of H pluses, right? An H plus stands for a hydrogen ion, okay? And so this is a free hydrogen molecule that is simply floating around in the solution. So the more free hydrogen ions we have floating around in a solution, the stronger the acid is going to be, okay? As we move closer and closer to 7, we're going to see we're getting closer to an equal number of these H pluses and these OH minuses. Okay, these OH minuses are hydroxide ions, and we're going to talk about those in a second when we get to bases. All right, this is our, this picture here is talking about a litmus test. So on litmus paper, an acid is going to turn blue litmus paper red. Okay, so that is one way that we can test to find out if a solution is an acid or a base. All right, a base, remember, is a substance with a pH of more than 7. All right, so the higher the pH, the stronger the base. Okay, so here in this picture we have some pictures of some bases. Some weaker bases would be salt, we have baking soda, and as we go up the list they become more and more basic. Okay, here in the middle is a picture that looks like the opposite of the diagram I had on the acids slide. If you look at this illustration, you can see there are way more OHs, which an OH stands for a hydroxide ion. And so you'll notice that in a basic solution, there are a lot more hydroxide ions than hydrogen ions. Okay, this is what makes the pH higher. Okay, when we find out the pH, this is what makes it higher. All right, so the more hydroxide ions and the fewer hydrogen ions, that means we're going to be talking about a base instead of an acid. Right, I do want to talk about the litmus paper test for a base. So for testing pH, if we use red litmus paper, it's going to turn, the base is going to turn it blue. Okay, so on red litmus paper, base turns it blue. Okay, make sure you know that. Remember, on blue litmus paper, an acid turns red, so acid turns it red, and on red litmus paper, the base turns it blue. So what does pH have to do with me? Is probably what you're wondering. Your body must maintain a blood pH about 7. What substance did we talk about earlier in our previous slide that also had a pH of 7? Hopefully you're thinking that water also has a pH, it has a pH of 7. So our body has to maintain a blood pH of about 7, which is very close to the pH of water. That's why it's so important that we make sure we're drinking lots of water and that we're staying hydrated, because our cells and our blood need that to maintain what we call homeostasis. Okay? Homeostasis is maintaining internal balance. Okay, so maintaining internal balance within our bodies and within our cells, that is homeostasis. Okay, which means that if our blood pH becomes too acidic or too basic, we can actually die. It can be equal to death. Okay, so down here I've included a little diagram, and we see our normal pH is somewhere between 7.35 to 7.45. So if you get just a little bit too far over that, 7.8, your organs are starting to shut down. If you get too below that, if you get too far below 7, we're getting, in the 6s over here, your organs are starting to shut down. You're going to start having difficulty to live, and it could eventually lead to death. So maintaining pH is super important for us as living creatures as well as other living animals. Now, when you talk about plants often have to have a certain pH concentration in the soil. If the soil is too acidic or too basic, they aren't going to be able to grow correctly. This is especially true with certain types of flowers like hydrangeas that like a certain type of acidic soil. And if the soil is not the right pH, then that flower is not going to be able to grow. Okay, so this takes us to the end of our pH video if you were in my regular biology class. Everyone, however, needs to write these 3 questions down and answer them below your notes. What is pH? What's the difference between an acid and a base? And why is pH important? Okay, so write these 3 questions down and answer them as a recap over the pH video lesson notes. If you are in my pre-AP biology class, you need to keep on watching for a further detailed section on how we actually calculate pH. Okay, this next part is for pre-AP only, so if you are not in pre-AP, you do not have to watch this unless you really want to. Okay, so we talked earlier about how an acid has more H pluses, okay, and a base has more OH minuses, okay, so acids have way more hydrogen ions and bases have lots of hydroxide ions, okay. Well, when we talk about pH, pH is actually going to equal the negative log of the concentration of hydrogen ions. Okay, this negative that you see here, this negative actually means that as the number of hydrogen goes up, right, the pH is going to go down. So as we get more hydrogens, we get a stronger acid, right, a lower pH. So that's why I told you earlier that the more H pluses in a solution, the stronger the acid. This is the equation that we use to calculate that. So again, the more hydrogens we have over here, this negative tells us that the more hydrogens we have over here, the lower this pH is going to be. Okay? Now, you're probably wondering, what is this log number right here in the middle? Well, a log is a base of 10. Okay? So that means that a substance with a pH of 1 is going to be 10 times stronger of an acid than something with a pH of 2. Okay, so that's what that log means. It's simply telling us that if it is 10 times stronger acid, right, there's a difference by 10 times that amount. It's not just a small difference, it's a huge difference. So that's what that log is telling us. Okay, so just remember that the more H pluses, the lower the pH, which means on the opposite side, when we're talking about bases, if we're talking about a base, that's going to be, we're going to have fewer H pluses when we're talking about a base, right? So the fewer H pluses, the higher the pH. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you, and this is why I showed you that diagram earlier in our video. But again, this whole thing is based on the concentration of our hydrogen ions. And as our hydrogen ions change, that's what causes us to change our pH. If we have lots of hydrogen ions, our pH is lower because of this negative. If we have only a few hydrogen ions, that's going to mean our pH is higher, again, because of that negative. So it's going to flip. It's kind of like the opposite. Okay, so the more hydrogen ions, the lower the pH. The fewer hydrogen ions, the higher the pH, the more basic. Right, so this concludes our video. You need to go ahead and make sure you have everything written down, rewatch any parts that you have confusion about, and be prepared to do some assignments over this in class tomorrow. All right, have a great rest of your evening.